Hello, this is Grandmaster Ted Gambadella with 10 more things I learned from the Royce Gracie seminar. We attended another Royce Gracie seminar at Guy Metro Sports Combat Club, and we learned 10 things that are vitally important. Here's number one thing that we learned, a valuable life lesson that should last you for the rest of your life. Mr. Gracie thinks that Brock Lesnar is overrated, and that he has done really nothing to add to the sport of MMA. Now, when he said this, he got very emotional, and it created quite a stir in the room, and a lot of people came to the defense of Brock Lesnar, and I happen to really love Brock Lesnar. But he went on to explain exactly what he meant. And he said things like Chemo is a better fighter than Brock Lesnar, which prompted more people to go crazy and stuff. But Master Gracie went on and explained it in a way that we could understand what he was talking about, and I think it makes sense, and you follow along with me and you tell me if you do. He said that Brock Lesnar was a great wrestler, but he was very strong, but he was 300 pounds. And you're supposed to be very strong when you're 300 pounds. If you're 300 pounds and you lift weights and you're a great wrestler and you know a little bit of jiu-jitsu, you're going to be very difficult to beat in the ring and in the street. And Master Gracie admitted that. But he said that the only reason that Brock was so hard to beat was because he was so strong and so mean and was simply winning by overpowering his opponents. That he showed very little technique and very little knowledge of jiu-jitsu and real MMA fighting. Now, Gracie went on to say that fighters who were also strong and knew a lot, like Georges St. Pierre, were doing much more for the sport of MMA than fighters like Lesnar. He just didn't think that Lesnar knew enough or knew anything, and was adamant about that he was just big and strong and mean and tough and really was doing nothing for the sport of MMA. And after a few minutes of discussing that, we began to see his point. And let me try to relay it to you and see if you follow along and get it. If you're huge and mean and tough and mean, and you beat people up because of your sheer power, size, and strength, you're not doing anything that can be taught. How do you teach a 175-pound man to pick up a truck? Or to pick up a 350-pound man and smash him to the ground and hammer fist him into submission like Brock Lesnar does? You can't. The techniques that Brock Lesnar uses are not techniques that can be taught and shared with other students of mixed martial arts. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was invented and established so that a smaller man could defeat a larger, stronger man. And it has been proven conclusively in the streets and in the MMA rings. And it works every single time against anyone who is bigger and stronger and meaner than you, who does not know any jiu-jitsu or any ground fighting skills. And if they do, it's all changed. It all changed since Royce Gracie won the first 4 UFCs, or won the first 3 and 3 out of 4 UFCs. All the men that Mr. Gracie fought were huge, strong, mean, much bigger than Royce Gracie, but they did not know how to fight on the ground. And so when they got on the ground, 99% of the fights do, they lost. Royce was able to dominate them on the ground and beat them and win every match. But times have changed, and fortunately or unfortunately, the bigger and stronger and meaner men are now taking MMA, and they are bringing all that size, power, and strength and meanness to the ring, and they are beating much more skilled and technical jiu-jitsu fighters. Don't get me wrong, jiu-jitsu is the greatest fighting art in the world. We believe that, and we've been teaching jiu-jitsu for 47 years. But if you teach a street punk jiu-jitsu and boxing and wrestling and kicking, you will lose. Your jiu-jitsu will lose 97% of the time. Chuck Liddell was the first MMA fighter to realize that. And despite the fact that Chuck Liddell was a great wrestler, and we're not sure how much he knows about jiu-jitsu, he refused to go on the ground and fight. When you did put him on the ground, he got right back up and beat you up with his hands. Chuck Liddell changed the UFC forever, and we don't like the way he changed it, but that's the old way, and that's not going to come back. And Chuck Liddell, using the new UFC way, won for years and has invented the new UFC way of fighting. The new UFC fighters know a little bit about everything, but they're not great in anything. But they're bigger and stronger and meaner. and they win. It was not that way when Gracie fought, and will never be that way again. We see Master Gracie's point about Brock being like a punk, someone who is a bully, who wins by sheer size, strength, and power, and not bringing anything to the MMA world. But that's the way it is. That's the new way. And that's the way it's going to stay in the UFC and in the real world. Times have changed, and people like Brock Lesnar are now the dominant fighters in the UFC. I'll be back tomorrow with another of my 10 things I learned from Royce Gracie. This is Grandmaster Gambardella. See you next time.